common reaction in food, and then second about what is done mainly for food processing food. Let's start about food reactions. So what are these types of food reactions, etc. But before, we want to go have an overview about where does the food chemistry fit into the studying food. So we are in nutritional science, but we need to study food. We need to know where this specific topic fits into the totality of studying foods. So when we talk about food chemistry, so here we're talking about agriculture, food science, and nutrition. Then when we're talking about nutrition, so food science is a focus on properties of food into the processing. So it's like before that is consumed. This is when we're talking about food science. While nutrition, it focuses on the physiological effect of the food. So these are the terminologies we may have seen so many times. We'll talk about agriculture. So agriculture is to study how to produce food, plants, animals, what happened in the farm or in the field. So this is when we study agriculture. So we can study food chemistry in the field, in the larger field of agriculture. We study our focus here, although we'll be talking about food, we'll be giving an example of food chemistry in the agriculture, but the focus is food chemistry within, food chemistry within food science, studying how to maintain food quality. So in here, when we talk about food science, because it's important, there are like lots of mixtures between nutrition, food science, what does this mean, etc. So when we talk about the farm through the fork, so from when it's in the field, when it's in the farm, to our plate. This is the food processing. When we're treating the food, or treating the food matrix, we're processing it, packaging, etc. This is, and goes under the umbrella of food science. Food science encompasses other disciplines. So when we're talking food chemistry, it's understanding how chemical composition of food affects quality. So how, for example, the content of sugar may affect the quality, and etc. So it includes nutritional quality as well. So food safety and chemical contaminants. So here, for example, when we talk about the quality that is changed because of food contaminants, because of the presence of pesticides, etc. So here we're always talking. So the food science also encompasses a discipline that is called microbiology, food microbiology. Here when we study microbes in the food. So either the bad one or a good one. So for people who are taking NFS386W1 next year, we will be talking about this. So what are these? So the bad one, when we're talking about foodborne disease, pathogens that are involved in foodborne diseases, E. coli, salmonella, so these are contaminants. Then when we talk about beneficial one, when we talk about probiotic in food, when we talk about lactic bacteria that are used to produce cheese or yogurt, these are beneficial ones for humans. And then food science also encompasses food biotechnology and GMO, or genetically modified organisms, food processing and engineering, and sensory analysis. And all this is giving you a small, tiny example of what can be done in the sensory analysis. So this is what encompasses food. While nutrition is different, so when we study nutrition, we're studying the impact of food on health. Food science, it's before it gets ingested, it affects our health. But then in here, it's like when we're talking about the physiological effect of food. So how these interact in the with our physiology. And so when we talk about studying nutrition, we're talking about beyond the food, after the food is ingested. And here there are, of course, it's all about food, and there are overlaps. For example, when we talk about foodborne diseases, these are overlaps, or foodborne intoxication or toxicity. Intoxication are merely can be studied under the umbrella of food science, while toxicology, because these are long-term, etc. These are nutrition. This is just to give you an idea. So then here, this is kind of very easy quiz to say, well, which is not a food science paper. So for example, if you have 4 papers, first studying the effect of thermal and non-thermal processing treatments on fatty acid and free amino acids of grape juice. Second, studying the effect of breakfast cereal processing on the availability of rats of vitamin E. So studying the effect of processing this breakfast cereal on the bioavailability of vitamin E. Then the C is caffeinated beverage intake and the association with risk of cardiovascular disease. And for example, this paper is talks about proscriptive analysis. Then another paper talking about the aspartame, which is a sweetener, stability in commercially sterilized flavor dairy beverages. So what do you think, which one is not food science? So food science is before being ingested, nutritional science is after being ingested and affecting health. Yeah.
I would say C.
C? Okay. Yeah. Who will choose A? Who will choose B? Who will choose C? And who will choose D? No. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. It's C. Yeah, it's C. So why is C? Because we're looking at an intake, so an ingestion of a beverage that later on will affect, so it will be interacting in our body and affecting a specific health outcome. Okay, so there are major concepts when studying food chemistry. So when we talk about food chemistry, we'll be talking about chemical reactions. And we'll be talking about physical structure of a food. Texture, like it can even be a microstructure of a food. And all these together will be responsible for quality attributes of a food. So what does a quality attribute of a food? So it's just a characteristic. It can be nutritional quality, so for example, stability of nutrients. So for example, when we're doing food formulation, we need, as a quality, we need to have nutrients that are stable and they're micronutrients that they're bioavailable. So this is food quality, food quality attribute. And quality attribute: the smell, the taste, the texture, the color, etc. Why I'm talking about this? Because you will need to choose one quality attribute for your paper. So you will need to, for example, to have the effect of pasteurization on the texture. So quality attribute is the texture. Then we'll have a physical structure. All over the class, we'll be talking about different structure of food. We'll be talking about amorphous, we'll be talking about crystalline structure. So amorphous is like when we're talking about gels. And then we'll be talking about emulsions. And then we'll be talking about the food as a matrix or as a tissue. So it can be plant or it can be meat. So talking about physical structures. So there are two physical structures. So one we call amorphous. So what does this mean? Is the one here? It's disorganized or disordered arrangement of molecules. So it's not very well structured. And then it may not be very well stable as a food itself. And then we'll have crystalline. So you just think about crystals. Crystals are usually hard, stable, they cannot be modified easily. When we talk about amorphous, we think about gels or jellies. These are easy to handle and they don't have a very well-defined structure. So these are the differences. The structures, amorphous and crystalline, can be exchanged depending on the process. One product can have an amorphous structure, and then later this structure can be changed for different reasons to become crystalline and vice versa. One example is honey. Honey, because it's composed of glucose and fructose, as we all know, so it's 30–40%. And then the glucose is present in the honey is close to saturation. And then if you leave the honey sitting for a long time, I'm sure many of you have seen this, and then this structure become more crystalline, more structured. And then this is where the overall structure of the honey changed. And we think that, oh, it was deteriorated and we need to throw it. No, it's not deteriorated because just heating it, you will go back and then have this amorphous. It's just a matter of rearranging the molecules within this food matrix. So here I'm just giving this picture, it just tells you the amorphous here, and then usually sometimes it turns into a more crystalline structure. It's like a harsh, almost kind of a sugar. I'm sure you have seen this before. Then, this was an example of glucose changing from crystalline, from amorphous to crystalline. And then this structure or the composition or these structures can also be seen in other polymers. So when we talk about honey here, we're talking about monosaccharides or disaccharides. So we're talking about glucose and fructose. But then crystalline versus amorphous structure can also be seen. We're talking about polymers. So polymers, so it is just a combination of two poly meaning many, mers meaning units. So multiple units of sugar or multiple units of protein. We'll see this a lot. So these are long chain molecules that are made of multiple units. So polysaccharides, it's made by multiple units of glucose or fructose or glucose and fructose together, etc. So this is starch is a polysaccharide, a non-polysaccharide, and then we have proteins. We'll see this together. Today I'm just giving you an overview about what we'll be seeing together. So when we talk about polymer structure, a crystalline structure of the polymer, and here we have these long chains. Instead of having monomer or monomolecules packed together, here we'll have polymers that are packaged together or closely packed. And then usually, we'll see this in the next slide, usually we have them connected or bounded with hydrogen. So this is what we call hydrogen bonding. And at the opposite, we will have amorphous polymers. So amorphous polymers is just like disorganized or not well-arranged structures of polymers. Where we will have more space between these polymers, so it creates more space where, for example, water can enter between them, and to make this structure non-stable. So usually we have polymer to water hydrogen bonding because we have water entering within this here, for example, see, and the other one. So here, for example, have it. This is kind of a structure. It's not drawn by hand, but almost. So here, for example, see every chain, every line. These are one chain of polymers. So we will have 1, 2, 3, 4 polymers. So but these are together because they're not very well structured. There is a little association between them. They're not very well associated. And here we're talking about the amorphous. Then, for example, in this specific case, we will have, let's say, during the processing, we will add the calcium, for example. And then the other calcium will help making these calcium electrostatic interaction, and it will help bounding the polymers together, and then creating more or strong region of strong association. So then here, see here, this one, and then the calcium goes here, and then we have more structured association. And then it can even go stronger if it's very well structured. And then here we'll see this in the lectures. We'll be talking. So for example, this one it can be called eggs box. So it's like the box of eggs. It's kind of hexagonal. So this is what we call here eggs. So here, when we talk about gel, the gel, so it's an amorphous structure. A gel is a liquid within a continuous network of polymers. So what this is how a gel, how we define a gel. So here, for example, we have, in this specific case, we have a network or a grid, as you can see here, and these can be either polysaccharide or can be proteins. So one grid is one polysaccharide or one polypeptide or one structure of protein, and then they are, you just imagine you have a grid and you have connection between the two lines that are here, two polymers. And then this connection is what we call the crystalline region, or the junction zone, where we have junction or connection between the polymers. So the crystalline region, I added here just for your information. Crystalline region, by definition, is the points where the polymers interact with each other. Where they are connected with each other in the connection. So, and then we have, as I said in the previous slide, where we have polymer to polymer hydrogen bonding. So we have bonding between, we have connection between. Because to be able to be connected, we have to take them. Like imagine these calciums and hydrogens, they are tapes. And then they have been connected in group. They have been connecting between them. And then when we have, for example, in this, the gel is, as I said, liquid within a continuous network. And then if you add water to this specific structure, the water gets inserted in the space, because here you imagine there is a grate, in the space between the polymers. When the water is inserted, then this gel gets extended. You just imagine, it's like kind of the case of where you have a sponge, it's dry, and then when you add water, it gets extended. So it's the same thing when we are talking about these polymers or these gels. Then, over the class, we were talking about emulsions. Emulsion, what are these? By definition, is a discrete particle that is dispersed in a continuous phase. So there is a phase that is discrete, and there is and then that is dispersed or spread into a phase that is continuous. So one is continuous, and then one is dispersed. So here we have two. Usually these phases are not in a normal condition. They are not mixed together. So when we talk about oil and water, so these are not mixed. But then if we have, let's say we have a cup of water, and we put some drops of oil. Here we will have oil that is dispersed in water. We have drops of water that are dispersed, drops of oil, that are dispersed in this cup of water. And here we'll be talking about oil in water emulsion, where the discrete particle or the particles that are dispersed is the oil, and then the phase that is in continuous, that is not changing, is the oil. We have the opposite. We have a cup of oil, and we add a few drops of water. And then here we have the opposite, and then this is what we call water in oil emulsion. So the discrete particle or the dispersed one oil droplets, are the water, the droplets of water, and then what are dispersed or that are spread into a continuous phase, that is oil. So here you can say most of the time the dispersed, the continuous, the volume or the quantity of the continuous phase is higher or larger or bigger than the dispersed, the dispersed one, so then they get dispersed. But we'll see that this is not all the cases, because sometimes the volumes they get exchanged. But I want you to remember the difference between these emulsions, these types of emulsion, because we'll go through this for so many times. And you will be surprised to see examples of emulsions. Because here, when we think about this, we think about dressings, salads. So these are the most known example of emulsion. But then other milk can be considered as an emulsion because particles of fat milk are dispersed into continuous into the liquid, etc. So we'll see together. Because these are oil and water, that we can never ever be able to keep them mixed, so they're always separated. To be able to keep them, to keep this mixture, we'll need sometimes something that we call stabilizers that help us to stabilize. Because, for example, you have a cup of water, you add oil, you shake, and it gets mixed. And then these drops, then later they go together, and then they are gathered, and then you see phase separation. So to avoid this gathering of oil, for example, we add stabilizers. So these are emulsifying agents. So what are these? These are structures. They have polar and non-polar units, and then usually they're mixed in with the dispersed with the dispersed phase. And then, because these are polar, so there is a repulsion, so they don't, there is they create a repulsion force so that they will never be able to gather again. So this is the job of emulsifying agent. We'll see together. Yeah.
Where do we add that emulsifier? Like, do we need to add it into the oil, or like how to make it?
We add it because it depends on the structure, on the chemical structure. We'll see the type of emulsifier. So it depends on the structure and then the length of these. So usually we add them within the mixture. So there is no order to add them. Yeah. So as I said, so these are stabilizing agents that they had creating repulsion force to avoid, to keep this separation. Then we'll move to chemical reaction. So chemical reaction will have free radical formation. It's known. We have oxidation, hydrogenation, esterification, Maillard or Browning reaction, and enzymatic Browning reaction. Maillard reaction, it's called non-enzymatic Browning reaction. We'll see it in a few slides. And then we have a regular enzymatic reaction. So, the reason why I will go a little bit fast through these ones. So the reason why, so that you get familiar with the type of reaction, because you will need also to know or to choose a type of reaction or type of chemical or for type of processing for your research. So when we talk about free radical formation, this is this is kind of an overview. So what do we mean by free radicals? So these are oxygen-containing compounds with unpaired electrons, which make them extremely reactive. So within a structure, so we usually have the oxygen compound containing compound that is very easy reactive. And then, so these within a food matrix, so we have reactive oxygen species, and then which lead to unpaired electrons, so like electrons that are easily reacting with the other components. Why it's important to know about the free radical formation? Because free radical formation are always associated with oxidation, and then these oxidation lead to the deterioration of food and what we call rancidity. It's a ranc taste of oil mainly or fat-based products. So, and this is a type of deterioration that we don't need during the food processing. So how does this work? For example, we have a fatty acid here, LH. We have the alkyl radical, and then we have the hydrogen. So the hydrogen is abstracted from a fatty acid to yield to free radicals. So this is a compound with unpaired electrons. So it can be easily reacting. I'll be giving you the transcripts here for these slides, so then it's easy to remember the main message on this. So don't worry about it. Although I know that you have seen this in your other courses, so we're just going fast, kind of a reminder of what you have seen. So first the hydrogen is abstracted. So this abstraction usually happens when we have a double bond structure or near to the double bond structure, and then the radical formation, the process happens very slowly. So this is why, for example, so free radical formation can happen, as I said, in oils, in fat, etc. And then this is why, for example, it happens when after a long time storage of oils or of high fat content foods, etc. So because the composition, the reaction happens slowly. The reaction are catalyzed by light, so the light can trigger or catalyze or even enhance this reaction, or in the presence of metals can also have. So this is why, for example, it's highly recommended to, for example, when we talk about olive oil, it's highly recommended to store it without light, so to avoid the light, and then to not store this one in metal container that we minimize or we avoid this oxidation. So we have the abstraction of hydrogen, then this compound becomes more active. So it goes through cascade. And then here we're talking about the oxidation, where we have more a cascade or chain reaction. So we have free radical that is mixed or reacting with the oxygen, and as I said, it goes another cascade to yeah. So these additional reactions may lead to a compound that is rancid. It enhances the rancidity, and then it leads to a product or food that is not consumable. So it's an off flavor. Then we have another type of reaction, is the hydrogenation. So hydrogenation is, by definition, adding hydrogen across the double bond. So we have unsaturated fatty acid, which we have here. So for example, first one, so we have C3, C18, 3. So C18 meaning there are 18 carbons, and then 3, that means there are 3 double bonds. And then 2 meaning 2 double bonds, 1 is 1, and then 0 is unsaturated. So we can go, by adding hydrogen, we can go from C18, 3 to C18, 0 by adding hydrogen. So why do we do this? So the hydrogenation, it helps to enhance the stability. So there are like pros and cons of the hydrogenation. On the industrial perspective, we like hydrogenation. As a nutritionist, we try to avoid hydrogenation. Why? So the hydrogenation will just help enhancing the stability of oils or of the fat. It also leads to the production of more solid fats. For example, when we produce the margarine, the basis of the margarine is oil. Then we go through a process of hydrogenation to make this product. But the cons or the disadvantage of hydrogenation is enhancing the risk or augmenting the risk of creating trans fats. And trans fats, they have been associated with cardiovascular disease and other diseases, etc. So this is why. So hydrogenation can be absorbable. So both cis and trans isomer, for example, in this specific, both cis and trans. You know what is cis and trans, right? So when it's the same and the opposite direction of the double. So this is why, for example, this fat and saturated fat was banned from the food supply since 2008 in Canada because of higher risk of cardiovascular disease. And then we have esterification or ester-esterification. So we all know what is the ester. So it's this is the structure. So it's like a mixture of glycerol and fatty acid. So esterification is the reaction of an alcohol and acid to form ester. So this is a typical reaction. And I added here a sentence just to say that most of fats in food are made of triglyceride. This is known as, or what we call triglyceride. So triglyceride, this is the structure. So these are esters of glycerol and fatty acid. So here we have 3 fatty acids. Brown can be any fatty acid. And so when processing, we do what we call enter-esterification. So what do we mean by enter-esterification? So we change the position of the fatty acids here. So for example, you see the brown, we change the position of the fatty acid, but we don't change the composition. So for example, we have 2 compounds. Well, let's go through these in details and when we talk about later on the lipids. So we have 2 different so we have this food. It has 2 different structure or 2 different patterns, and we will exchange or interchange the position of the fat. So here, so when exchanging, we can exchange the quality attribute, but we don't change the composition, because as you can see, the number of green and the number of brown are the same, but their position has changed. And this is what we call enter-esterification. So we esterify within the same structure. So the enter-esterification can be either from A to B or from B to A. So it depends. So either a structured one or a non-structured one. And it will depend. So this playing with esterification and esterification, for example, we will see very interesting when we talk about chocolate, when we talk about, we'll give you other example of how the enter-esterification can be important or interesting when processing food. So as I said, so there are 2 ways. It can be either directed or it can be random. So do we need it directed in a specific way? So this we can have in changing the melting temperature. For example, when we try to make another type of chocolate that can dissolve in at 30 degrees or 37 degrees. So this is where people play with the esterification and esterification of the fat in this way. So it can be directed or direct or random esterification, depending on salt. And as it's obvious, so here this is more homogeneous and this is more heterogeneous. So what do we want to do? What's the purpose of doing this in the food industry? And then we talk about, this is very common, you see it, you have it, you do it at home, you see it almost every time. It's a Maillard reaction. I know, I am used to call it Maillard reaction because this is what I have learned, and it's a French word. And then it is French. It's called the French researcher who created or who invented or who first discovered this. But then English pronunciation, it can be called Maillard reaction. Maybe I can just find the pronunciation online and post you the link so that you see the real pronunciation. But I call it Maillard reaction. This is why I'm using the code. Okay. It's like there are French words that are coming to English and we stick with. Okay. So, Maillard reaction, it's not enzymatic reaction, browning reaction. So, when we talk about browning of the food, so for example, you have an apple pie. You're preparing an apple pie. You put it in the oven and it comes back brown. You leave the apples from when you're preparing the apple pie, your apples become brown. So while preparing the apple pie, so you have 4 apples, you only needed 2 apples for your apple pie, but then you left 2 apples open on the counter. Both of them become brown, one after being baked and one left on the counter. These are 2 browning reactions, but then one was browning in the oven due to temperature, due to the presence of a sugar of amino acid, and this is what we call Maillard reaction. The other one changed the color in the on your counter because of enzymatic reaction. So we will, over the classes, we will see the difference between enzymatic and non-enzymatic reaction. So Maillard reaction is one of the most studied reactions in food chemistry. So this is a cascade or multiple reactions that happen between sugar and protein, or sugar and amino acid, to produce brown colored compounds that are typically produced during the heating. So for the Maillard reaction, we need 3 components. We need presence of amino acid or protein, we need the presence of sugar, and we need the heating, obviously. And then we will see later the difference between Maillard reaction and the caramelization. So caramelization is another browning reaction, but we will see the difference between them. So these Maillard reaction, or the enzymatic, they include the condensation, so the reaction of 2 molecules within the elimination of small molecules. So usually we eliminate the water during the first reaction. Then there is a rearrangement. We'll see it together. And then it's a cascade of molecular reaction over the time that had produced. So this is, I don't want you to remember this structure, but this is a typical structure that we, for example, get when we heat a product that contains the xylose, or it's a pentose, and contains an amino acid that is, for example, here in this case, the alanine. So xylose and alanine, with presence of heating, they had producing this structure that we call the furfural. It's product formed during the breakdown of the glucose. So this is a typical product that we can see from the Maillard reaction. Why browning is important? It helps enhancing the quality of food. It's mainly about quality of food, texture and structure, etc. So one of the most known browning reaction is coffee. So coffee, what is collected in the top figure is green product. Then the grains are then dried, and then they go through the process of heating to change the color. So the color of these grains, or the grains of coffee, are colored, and then this is what we call the browning reaction. So this is mainly due to the presence of sugar in this grain excess. So this is another example. So when we go to the enzymatic browning reaction, so here this reaction happens mainly in vegetables or fruits. Enzymatic because you need the presence of an enzyme that catalyzes the browning reaction in the plants. So this is what happens when you have apples. So you open your apple, and then so you cut the apple into 2, and then after a certain time it gets brown. So why? Because there is an enzyme, say for potato and other fruits or vegetables. There is an enzyme that is called polyphenol oxidase. So this polyphenol oxidase, with the presence of air, it gets catalyzed and it starts reacting. And it is responsible for this browning. So another typical, as I said, apple, this is very common, we have seen this so many times. And another time is the transformation of green tea to black tea. So green tea become black, certain species of tea, obviously, due to this enzymatic reaction. So for example, here I'm just giving you an example of apples. A browning reaction, they depend on the mixing of the substrate and the enzyme. So it really depends. So it needs presence of it needs the adequate temperature. It needs presence of oxygen to enhance the activities. And then we move to common chemical reactions. So this I will leave it. I will pause it later. So food that is placed, you can think about it, and then we will go back to this slide next week to see to discuss it. So how about the food processing? So there are different process. Food can be processed differently. It can be blanched, pasteurized, etc. So what do we mean by blanching? It's a treatment. It's a thermal process. So we expose the food to a temperature. Why do we do it? This is to inhibit the enzymatic, the enzymes, or to destroy the enzymes that are present in these vegetables or fruits. That involves briefly exposition of fruits and to steam or hot water. We do it. Many of you I know they do it at home, for example. We want to put boiling water and we just throw our fruit or vegetables. So this is what we call blanching. We don't cook it, but we blanch it, and the main purpose is to preserve the quality of food, we'll see it later, but to destroy this enzyme to avoid the enzymatic reaction. Pasteurization. Pasteurization is one of the most known heat treatments. So it's the exposing a product to a specific combination of time temperature. So that the main purpose is to destroy the microorganisms. Here, organisms, it's microorganisms. To destroy. Why is I cannot see? Okay, it just disappeared from my screen. But leaves some spoilage microorganisms. Pasteurization doesn't kill all the microorganisms. Some are heat resistant and they will stay shade. So this is why, for example, when we have milk at home and we take and we leave it, we alternate and we leave it for a long time, it gets deteriorated and we don't know why. So this is because some spoilage microorganisms are still there and then they start growing and reacting. So pasteurization, I didn't give you purposely specific temperature because it depends. This is what we call coupled time temperature. So there are specific times and specific temperature. We enhance, we increase the temperature, we reduce the time. Or we reduce the temperature and we increase the time. The purpose is to kill, to destroy the pathogen microorganisms. Then we have sterilization. Sterilization is just to make our products sterile. Example of microorganisms. So we kill all the microorganisms. So this is a thermal process. We also so where the products are exposed to higher temperatures. So usually the temperature is higher than 120 degrees. So it exceeds 110 or 120 degrees. So this one we talk about the sterilization. Sterilization have pros and cons. Pros destroys everything. It makes products sterile. But the cons is that sterilization may affect the quality attribute of a product. Then we have canning. So canning, for example, when we buy vegetables in cans, so how these were made. So they are blanched and they are filled into cans and then frozen, and then they go to they get exposed to a specific time temperature with the pressure. be able to destroy all the microorganisms in the heart. So we heat, so that in the heart or in the middle of, or the center of this can, we destroy everything. So this is what we really do canning. So canning you need to remember the difference, or to know the difference between heat treatment, regular heat treatment, and the canning, because they're different. So here, it's another. And then we have aseptic processing, so the process of heating food to pasteurizing or commercially sterilizing, then adding food to a sterilized container. So this is different. So can usually, we put the food and we sterilize. Then aseptic processing, we sterilize and then we add the food in a container that is sterile. So there are pros and cons of both, but both of them are used. Then we have what we call ultra-hot temperature, or USG. So this is where we go and extrude for example, milk can be treated with USG. So thermal process that pasteurize or sterilize. So I gave you the definition. It's mostly for sterilizing to sterilizing the product and short. So it's like an express or short sterilization. So usually they're put in silos, and then with high pressure, the steam, there are two cylinders. That we have milk and we have hot steam, and they get exposed to each other in a very short time with high temperature. And it has. There are pros and cons of UHC as well. But then we have other food processing techniques that are unusual or unconventional. So when we talk about microwave is another way to kill microorganisms. Radio frequency, so radio frequency, so it can also be destroyed, especially in microorganisms. The ohmic, you might have seen, so you might have heard about it. So it's like we put a product, we introduce, it's like putting electricity within the food product, or letting electricity or electricity pass within a product, so then it helps destroying the microorganisms. And then we have the infrared. Then when we talk about non-processing, others, so these are non-conventional and less commonly used. So for example, when we talk about pulsed electric field, so we have a specific pulsed electricity that has destroying. So here, when we do this processing, pasteurization, sterilization, mainly about destroying microorganisms or destroying pathogens to enhance the quality or for safety of the product. And then we have ultra pressure. This can be done, but it's very less common. Same for ultrasound. Ultrafiltration can be done for very specific products. Usually these are liquid. Obviously, we cannot filter something that is not liquid. Ultrafiltration, we can use it for. We mainly use the filtration because ultrafiltration. So the difference between ultrafiltration and filtration is the pore or the size of these holes. So the principle for filtration, so we have a cylinder that has holes, and then for example, the liquid, milk or juice, go from one side to another. So the liquid goes because this is liquid, so it goes through the filter, and then microorganisms, they are left or imprisoned inside the filter, inside this cylinder. And then the difference between filtration and ultrafiltration is the size or the pore of this cylinder. So we want to keep very small particle. We want to keep microorganisms and even other particles. We don't care. So it really depends on what do we want. So usually when we talk about filtration, we have the size of the pores around 0.5 micrometer. This is the size of a microorganism, and we want to retain in this cylinder. Okay. Then what? Yeah. So why do we have all these differences of treatments? We have heat treatment and we have non-heat treatment. So the purpose of heating is just killing microorganisms. We kill microorganisms that are responsible for foodborne disease, responsible for intoxication, etc. This helps us enhance or extend the shelf life, the time where the life of the product, either in the shelf, in the supermarket, or in the grocery, or even at home. So we want to keep the product as long as we can. So to keep this, we want to treat it and mainly eliminate microorganisms that are responsible for disease. So, but the heating can be a problem. So why the heat is a problem with, what is the problem with heat? Heating sometimes, it compromises the quality, food quality, of certain food attributes. So sometimes it compromises the taste, it compromises the texture, or the appearance, or even in nutritional value. Because if we don't control, for example, if we can pasteurize apple juice or orange juice, but if it's not done properly with the right time temperature, we'll be destroying vitamin C, for example. So if we destroy vitamin, we will be destroying microorganisms, but we will also destroying vitamins. And then this will affect the nutritional value, for example, of apple juice. So this is why when we think, so for example, research and development, etc., this is a very important and it's a concern of people. People are concerned. We usually talk about couple time temperature. So you may hear this sometimes. So it's a couple of food. So we have to choose a specific time and a specific temperature to be able to preserve as much as possible of this texture. So what we can do to avoid this? So we can have a combination of these processes. We can combine heating, filtration, changing the pH, changing the AW or activity of water or water content. So all these together, well, we can, so here for example, we start by heating. Then we chill the product. Then we can eliminate the water, because water, when the water is available, we'll talk about this next week. When the water is available, this is where microorganisms are happy, and this is where they are, this is what they need to grow. So water that is available is one of the important factors that we need to play with if we want to preserve the food. For example, this is why dried food are highly preserved or can have higher shelf life compared to non-dried or normal regular food. Then we can play with the oxygen, and then we can add preservatives, so chemicals that are either plant origin or synthetic to preserve. So this is what we call herbal technology. It's like a combination of all of it. Obviously, this is just an example. You will not find all these together in one process. So it depends. Sometimes we go for heating and we do the AW, or we go for heating and add the preservatives. Or we just remove, we reduce the AW and the S. So it's like a combination. The purpose of this combination is to minimize the harsh or to present the harsh manipulation of the product and to preserve higher quality of it. So when we talk about food processing, we can also talk about fermentation. So fermentation is called another food processing. It helps in preserving food. So for example, fermented vegetables can stay for longer time, can be preserved for longer time compared to non-fermented. So what does fermentation do? What is this? So it's the process that alters the food through the action of beneficial microorganisms. So for example, the cabbage, that is fermentation, it's transformed on the soft fruit or fruit. Milk that is transformed in yogurt, so this is another product of fermentation. Milk that is transformed into cheese, it's another, so it's considered, fermentation is considered as a way of preserving food, a way of transformation and way of preserving. And then we talk about microencapsulation. So we have encapsulation. So for example, so this is where, for example, we can have drugs, or we can have probiotics, or we can have vitamins, etc., that are encapsulated. So it's like bigger. We will talk about microencapsulation, and it's in a smaller size and a microscopic size. So what do we need? So it's a process that provides a protective. So why do we encapsulate it? We need to add a coat or a protection at a microscopic level to preserve. So we add it as either as a particle or a droplet to preserve the food. So for example, here in this case, we have fish oil, and then that is added to the yogurt. And so if we add the fish oil as it is to the yogurt, it may affect the quality. And then, but if we encapsulate it, so we add another coat, so that this doesn't affect the quality, the final quality of the food. So this is why the microencapsulation can also help acting as the same way as emulsifier. So the coat can help this product still be dispersed within the phase, etc. Then we have natural food preservative. So here we'll go to it in a few lectures. They can be plant-derived antioxidant or antibacterial, microbial, etc. So these can be produced by microorganisms or by even plants. So microorganisms are the most common. So antibacterial, for example, that can be added to specific food to inhibit the growth of microorganisms and to preserve the food. Then another food processing example is the extrusion. So food or food preparation are usually exposed to weak food. So if they're exposed to high pressure processing, so for example, or maybe just they finish the class. I'm just telling you, you need to finish. It's 11:30, we're almost done. Yeah, so high pressure cooking of the dough that is used to make steak. So we can make different forms with the high extrusion, etc. Like forming specific products. Then we have modified atmosphere packaging. We'll go through this again. So modified atmosphere is something very interesting. So we use a package that has a different atmosphere. Oh yeah, thank you. So that has different, so these packages, they can have different composition of gases, for example, CO2, etc. Then seen for people who are interested, I can give other examples of food package. So what we do, we remove the air, that is oxygen, and we add, for example, CO2. Because, so most, for example, in meat, the lots of contaminants, they are aerobic microorganisms, so they like oxygen, but they don't like CO2, for example. So we purge the CO2 or purge another mixture of gas to avoid. So we play with the composition of microorganisms. There are pros and cons of packaging. Then there are different packages, there are different mixtures, etc. For people who are interested, I can give other examples. And then genetic modification. Genetic modification, we can go, it's very long. We can do a lecture for genetic modification and how it's done and what are these, etc. So example of genetic modification is canola oil. And this, it's a Canadian oil that is genetically modified. We can modify, have genetic modification for plants that can be resistant to pesticide, etc. So it's a processing, it's another processing. So this is a question we can go through it next week. You can try to answer the question. Yeah. And then, so why I went through all this? So, because for this information, you will need it for your research paper. So your research paper, you will have to ask a question. So you will have different components for your research question. So for example, the question can be in this form. What effect does a process have on the quality attribute of food? So for example, what is the process? You need to identify one process. You need to identify one quality attribute, and you need to identify one food. So for example, a process can be pasteurization. The quality attribute can be a texture or flavor, vitamin C content. And then, for example, food can be juice, milk, anything. So then, I will send you this. We will talk in detail next week. And then, so we will have food. So I will give you a handout and you will have food. But then if you want to be creative, you want to suggest there are other food, I am open to any suggestion. Then you need to choose a process from the ones that I went through today. And you need to choose quality attributes. And then, so you will have example of food processes, etc. Next week we will discuss assignment, and then we'll start our